أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, respected brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining the second or the third lesson on logic for this course. I've managed to put a PowerPoint presentation together to make it much more accessible and easier to follow up with the lesson. And also, because of the shortcomings that are related to the book, firstly, the clarity. There's an issue with clarity in the book. It's not very clear. And I think that goes to mainly the transition quality. Not that great. And Islamic logic has its own terminology, has its own system of language that we don't have the equivalent for in English. So some of the English terms overlap with the Arabic ones in Western logic from Aristotle, but the Islamic scholars have developed their own terms when it comes to logic as well. And so translating those, we don't have a set or defined translation for these terms. Now, we have a book that was translated by Shaykh Abdul Hakim Karni, which is the book of Shaykh Mudaffar, and which is taught in the houses right now. He didn't finish translating the whole book. He passed away a few years ago. But his translation is wonderful. I mean, he was a professor at Wayne State University. He taught logic as well. So this is his area of expertise. His language usage is very good. That's a very good book to have. I might even share it on the group. Logic by Shaykh Mudaffar, translated by Shaykh Abdul Hakim Karni. And there's another book that was translated, which is a Persian rendering of the Shaykh Mudaffar book, which is in Arabic. He rendered the book into Persian, and then that Persian text was translated into English by the Islamic College of Advanced Studies in England. I haven't looked at the translation myself, but usually what comes out of that college is more professional or of high quality. So I'm trying to get that book, and I'm planning on using that book for advanced logic. So we'll keep this as an introduction to logic. I've tried to keep the slides as detailed as possible because we don't have a text to resort to for all the information. So that's why some of the slides might be, filled up with a lot of words. Just for reference, when you go back and read it, because you can't refer to the Arabic text and the book we have doesn't provide us with what we need, I kind of, filled up the slides as much as I can. That being said, it's still possible that there might not be a complete flow in the slides. Now, as I'm reading and preparing, I have to look at a number of texts outside of this book, maybe around 7 or 8 other books, and try to put ideas together to make sense of what's being said in this book. So anytime you don't find anything understandable, comprehensible, whether it's because of how I wrote it or how I explained it, or you think that I made a mistake in explaining as well, something didn't make sense, feel free to interrupt, and inshallah we can have a good learning experience. So we'll have the lights off right now. We're going to begin with a recap from lesson 2. And the question that we were looking to answer was, what is knowledge? Human beings understand things, and human beings acquire certain things. And this thing that we acquire with our minds, we've called knowledge. Whatever we learn, we termed it as knowledge. But what is it? What is the reality of knowledge? What is this information that we have? And what is this process of thinking that us as human beings go through in order to function and behave? I mean, everybody, if you look at yourself, you wake up in the morning and your brain functions in a certain way. You understand that this is the morning. You understand that you're in the house, that you have a family, that you might have a job, that you might be going to school, that you have to get your livelihood. And you have friendships. You want to pull up your phone and chat with a friend. So all these functions that we do, all this behavior that we do as human beings, Why do we do what we do? Why do we function this way? So, in a sense, there's a specific system by which the human mind works. And if we were non-humans, like, for example, animals don't function the same way that human beings function. Humans are able to connect certain things together that animals don't necessarily do. So, for example, anybody who has cats, and I've had many in my life, knows that if you have a cat and you point somewhere and you want the cat to look at an object in the house. Let's say there's a bird outside, and I've done it knowing that the cat doesn't respond to sign language. But there's a bird. I want the cat to see the bird, or I want her to see whatever's outside to go chase it. So I'll point to the thing. I'll point like, look, there's a bird there, go get it. And when I point, the cat will look at the tip of my finger. It won't look at the bird. It doesn't understand that the specific sign is, it means like to look afar. Whereas human beings would understand signs like that. Now, animals might be trained to understand certain commands, but it's not natural in them. Children, when you teach them, when you point towards something, they look towards that thing. They understand that this means look ahead or look towards where I'm pointing and things like that. So what is this that we acquire? This is a question that's occupied the minds of philosophers and humans ever since humans existed. They want to understand what are these things that are in our minds? How do we know reality? Why do I feel the way I feel? When I look at something outside and it comes into my mind and I observe it in a certain way, why do I think about it that way? Why do I think about emotions? Why do I think about, how beautiful this terrain is? I'm not sure if an animal or even a robot, let's say the, AI technology developed, would a robot sit down and, contemplate the ocean or the mountain range, sit down and think, oh, what a beautiful scene. It doesn't seem like they do this kind of thing. But even if they do it, us as human beings, we've always been intrigued by these issues. We want to understand why we understand the world around us in this kind of way. Why do we think the way we think? If I wasn't a human, would I still think the same way that I'm thinking right now? So humans claim that they think objective. They're able to think objective. They also have subjective thinking. But how objective is objective thinking? Do I only interpret the world around me the way I do because my brain is it functions that way? It's wired in a way to think this is how the world is and this is how I should understand the world? Is it the wiring of the brain that makes us think the way we think? Had it been wired in a different way, we would have understood reality and existence in a very, very different manner. So without delving too much into the theory of knowledge and trying to understand, how humans understand reality, and we know that there's a lot of schools that develop because of this. So in ancient Greece, you have Aristotle, who, in a sense, believed that we can actually reach reality. We can understand reality by observing it, and we can make claims that correspond to reality. And the theory that they came up with, the theory of correspondence, you can look it up as an entry, and you'll find out different opinions on this issue. So basically, what we believe corresponds with truth, with reality as it is. There are people who came and objected to this and said that we only see reality and understand it the way it is because it appears to us this way, and we can only understand it this way as human beings. We don't really understand reality as it is. And then we see the development of the school of skepticism. And I don't mean by that modern skepticism, I'm referring to Greek skepticism. They wanted to say that we don't really understand the truth or reality as it is. Things appear to us in a certain way, and we accept those things in their appearances because this is the only way we can continue living normally. If I can only touch this table or I can only see this table as white in front of me, or this board here as white, then I just accept it being white. Obviously, I see it white because of how my mind functions with my eyes. Different animal might not see this color. There are animals that are colorblind. There are animals that see different wavelengths of light. So to me, this board is white. To someone else, reality might be different for him, or to another creature. So skeptics started, doubting things. And during that time, the philosophers had a lot of debates and discussions with one another. Aristotle, based on his theory of correspondence, had specific implications that resulted from the theory. If you believe that you can reach truth, then you're going to be someone who has a lot of certainty, a lot of certitude in your life. Someone who believes that things are the way they're supposed to be. You're very assertive, you're very affirmative, and you make a lot of judgments. So you judge others and you judge yourself. So and this translates into other fields as well. So if we can reach truth or reality, we can grasp it and comprehend it as it is, then one result of that is the theory of ethics that Aristotle has. Aristotle has a specific set of beliefs when it comes to ethics and the human soul, make certain judgments that a person must behave in a certain way in order to be ethical. And it's like the path of moderation. So when it comes to anger, neither one of the two extremes is good. Not to be extremely angry and not to be not angry at all, with no anger. A path of moderation is to be found, for example. If you do that, that will result in a healthy life for you. That will result in a balanced life for the human being. And basically, you reach happiness, because happiness is the goal. The skeptics, on the other hand, are not really sure about this whole idea of the soul having these certain qualities that Aristotle was talking about, and said that the more we want to assert things, the more we want to discover things and understand their truth and reality, the more frustrated we're going to become. Because we cannot know the truth as it is. We can't know reality as it is. So if you take the path of Aristotle, you're going to spend your whole life trying to reach the truth, but you can't do that. So you end up always suffering and becoming frustrated, because the more you try to know something, the more you discover that you can't know it. There's something deeper to it. There's something more sophisticated and complex about what you're trying to find out. So the skeptics, on the other hand, at least the school of Seneca or Empiricus, Seneca is a Stoic. Empiricus is a very famous skeptic, and he has a few books that he wrote which have been translated into English in response to Aristotelian logic and philosophy. A school like his comes and says that we cannot understand reality completely. So what do? They say we dismiss judgment. We don't make judgment. This is on the opposite of Aristotle. As we're going to see right now, it's about making judgments and assents. The skeptics, on the other hand, they think that living a happy life, living a mentally balanced life, occurs through dismissing judgment. I cannot know things as they truly are. Once you accept that in yourself, you never go trying to chase the truth and reality. But it doesn't mean that you just sit down at home and not believe anything. No, you deal with reality as it appears to you. This is white, you treat it as white. Whatever implication comes from it being white, if it's white, I can draw black on it, then I'll do that and I'll benefit from that. But I won't claim that this board in its reality is white. I can never know that. The only time I can know the reality of something is that if I become one with that thing. Just like nobody can know who I am. Nobody can know who you are until they become you. As much as you talk about yourself, as much as they live with you, as much as they spend time with you and interact with you, they will never know you. The only time they can know you is if they become you. And this cannot happen. We can't know stuff through this. And we'll see later on over here what kind of knowledge Aristotle is dealing with, and what philosophers have to do to resolve this issue specifically. If we know things through their image, like if I look at you, I look at other objects, their image imprints in my mind. Am I really knowing the thing itself, or am I knowing its form and image that's reflected in my mind or in my spirit? Some philosophers came to argue that the image that's in your mind is actually more real than the object itself is outside, to resolve this issue. Because if you claim that there's no correspondence between the image and the object outside, then what do you know about the object? How can you speak of it? You're missing all this information. So to resolve this issue, they began speaking about the form or the image in the mind being immaterial, metaphysical. And anything metaphysical is much deeper, much more complex than the actual physical object outside. This is physical, it's confined to space and time. And these are limitations. The image in my mind doesn't have any limitations because it's metaphysical. Therefore, the object with no limitations is far greater and closer resembling truth than the object with limitations. This is one argument they make. And there's a lot of books and arguments that they've written to prove that the metaphysical image that imprints in our soul or in our mind is closer to truth and reality than the actual object itself. So I'm just trying to give an overview of the differences that were going on back during that time. So what we're dealing with here is knowledge specifically in the Aristotelian school of thought, and not in other schools of thought. So when we go through this, we have to keep this in mind. And once we understand this, it'll become clear why things are defined the way they are. So this is a very brief introduction here. Knowledge has been defined by logicians, and what I mean by logicians are those who are Aristotelian inclined logicians, as the presence of the object known in the knower. So the thing that you know is presence in the person who knows that thing. If I look at a tree, the image of the tree is imprinted inside of me. It's present inside of me. So I know the image of the object that's known, which is the tree, inside of myself. I'm aware of the tree. The thing known is in the knower. Now, there are three different modes of knowledge. We've spoken about them briefly last week. I'll speak about them once again, just to kind of refresh our minds and put them here in the slide. So I'm going to give a few scenarios. Scenario number one deals with sensible knowledge, knowledge that is acquired by the senses. So here's a human being with his brain, and obviously you need to have a brain to understand these. It's an intermediary or mediator to knowing things outside. Looking at a tree, and the tree is outside, and it remains outside. It doesn't go into the brain itself. But what goes into the brain? The image of the tree is in the mind. So when you look at it, this corresponds with this outside. So you have five senses, or five external senses. Now the philosophers say we have five internal senses as well. But we're not going to go into that because that's for a more advanced course. So we're going to stick with the five external senses. Touching, seeing, smelling. So the knowledge that you acquire about from things around you is sensible knowledge through your senses. You get to know images, you get to know forms, you get to know colors, you get to know shapes. These things come into the mind. And then the mind starts building relationships with them. So when you look at things outside of you, you observe the room around you. You have a table, you have a wall, you have a light bulb, you have a chair, you have people, you have a camera, and whatnot. These don't just exist in your mind, scattered, and they're just there. They're not just imprinted on a photo or on a paper. These things are there, but the mind functions in a way where it starts building relationships with them. So for example, if I have a chair in front of me, a chair in reality, let's say it's a wooden chair. In reality, there's nothing called a chair. Cherri does not have any reality. Cherri is a word or a notion that we made up, we invented as a human being. And we've said that a chair is something that people sit on, and it has four legs most of the time. And people sit on it in order to relax or to do any other thing that they want to do with it. But it's mainly for sitting on and doing a certain activity, either relaxing or something else. But if we remove that from our minds and we look at it, it's just a tree that's been cut and pieces put together, and it has no. So right now, if I cut a tree and I just stack like 7 different pieces of wood, randomly glue them together, and I look at it, I just think it's a random thing. But if I give it a specific function, and I can give it a name, then tell people that this is what it does, like a chair, for example, and then that gains reality in our minds. This is what the brain does. This is what the human mind does. So because it does that, because it relates things with one another, problems start happening. Mistakes start occurring in the process of thought of the human being. The second scenario is the rational knowledge. Now, this is after acquiring these images. The brain begins to derive universal laws and begins connecting things together. You see not one tree. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 trees. And you're able to count. So you give each one a number. Again, numbers don't have any reality outside of the human mind. There's nothing outside of us, outside of our mind, that says this is number 1. We assign a number to a tree or an object in order to count them for purposes that our minds want to understand things around it in a better way. So it begins giving universal. Every living thing requires a source of life. This is not something that exists outside of the mind. Things outside of us exist as they are. But the mind tries to make sense of these things that it's seeing. And it begins developing universal notions. Another one is the law of non-contradiction. This is something that the mind understands. It understands that if there's a sign which says sign not in use, it's contradicting itself. It doesn't make any sense. The mind starts going crazy. I mean, if it's not in use, then how am I understanding the sign that says it's not in use? It cannot. It's either in use or it shouldn't even be there. But it can't have a sign that's being used to tell me that it's not being used. This is the law of non-contradiction. A thing cannot exist and not exist at the same time. I cannot say that I'm here and not here at the same time. The mind doesn't accept that. So these are laws that the mind functions with. Just like there are physical laws that the universe has, that the whole universe is based upon. And these laws that humans understand as well. But they're there whether we understand them or not. The sun, the planets will revolve around the sun, whether we understand the physical laws that are involved in that or not. Us understanding that or discovering the laws has nothing to do with them existing. So in logic, the mind functions in a certain way. Whether we know about the law of non-contradiction or we don't, the human being in his nature cannot fathom or cannot comprehend something existing and not existing at the same time and place and whatnot. There are certain conditions for the law of non-contradiction. So this is how the mind functions. And this is where logic comes to play. Now, here's a summary. Obviously, it's not comprehensive, but it gives a good overview of the different modes of knowing that the human being has. Again, we went through them last week, so I won't take too much time on them. There are various modes of knowledge in human beings. Sensual, the one that was in scenario number 1, these are related to knowing physical things, and it's the lowest mode of knowledge. Now, there are internal senses as well, which I mentioned over here just for someone's curiosity. If you want to know them, you can go look them up as well. Ibn Sina wrote about these and other philosophers that followed him. Common sense is one of them, al-hiss al-mushtarak. Fantasy, khayal, apprehension, waham, imagination, and memory, which is a hafiza. And then here's another translation of these internal senses as well. So we're not going to talk about these. They might come later in the advanced course. We discuss these because we have to differentiate between what's rational, what reason deals with, what our rational mind deals with, and what our internal senses deal with. And imagination is not dealt with by reason. And imagination, or what deals with the imaginary realm, is something that is related to our senses. So if there's a problem in that, we have to resolve it in the sensible world, not in the irrational world. Reason doesn't get involved in that. But it helps us point out to the mistakes in it. But it's not related to that. So rational faculty, which is reason, through conceptualization. It's what we perceive through our rational faculty, the mind. For example, 2 + 2 = 4. The whole is greater than its parts. The law of non-contradiction. 3 examples of this. It's beyond physical, and it's responsible for reasoning, analyzing, and all these functions of the mind. Then we have intuitive. This is the highest mode of knowledge. It goes beyond reason. Right now, quantum physics, for example, says that it defies all the physical laws. So there is a reality in a sense. And I'm not saying that this perceives that. I'm just saying that there is a reality or a certain mode of reality that goes beyond the laws that we perceive or that we thought are the actual truth. And intuition is the human being being able to comprehend spiritual truths, not rational truths, spiritual truths, things that exist beyond the physical world. Now, reason functions in the physical world because the intermediary is the mind, and the mind cannot escape itself. It talks about metaphysics as well. Through reason, through logic, you're able to study philosophy and metaphysics. You are. But you cannot go beyond it. You cannot go beyond the mind's limitations. That's why Mullah Sadra, for example, the Islamic philosopher, said that his philosophy isn't just based on reason, because reason has a limitation. And you have Sufi masters such as Rumi, for example, who used to critique and criticize and attack the mind of the philosophers. And he used to say that the philosophers walk on a wooden leg, a very weak science, because they're limited in their thinking. They don't go beyond reason. So Mullah Sadra, in order to resolve this issue and develop a philosophy that goes beyond reason, says that, first of all, we have 3 different levels of reality. The first reality is our senses, and it stops when it comes to reason. Then reason stops at spiritual truths, which are acquired through intuition. So there's a limit for the mind. There's a limit for reason. It cannot surpass its own limitation. But through the spirit, through intuition, you're able to acquire certain truths and know certain realities that might not make sense in the rational world. And a lot of what comes from religion, for example, is supra-rational. That's what they call it. So you have rational and you have supra-rational, which is beyond reason. Ibn Sina, for example, when he comes to the issue of the resurrection, the bodily, physical resurrection, he says that based on my philosophical laws, physical resurrection or bodily resurrection in the hereafter is impossible. There can't be. Once the body goes and goes into non-existence, it cannot be resurrected again. That's one issue. So for example, if you go into non-existence, let's say this world ends and the afterlife comes about. The world ends, no more existence. So there's nothing you can point to anymore. If it disappears, whatever you come back with, you can't come back with it anymore because it's not there anymore. What are you bringing back? If everything goes into non-existence, what are you bringing back into existence? Anything that comes into existence after that is something completely different than what was there before. Because once it disappears, you can't point to it anymore. It has no more existence. So how can something end, go into non-existence, and come back into existence? That's one issue. And there's a whole different issues as well related to bodily and physical resurrection that him and others couldn't resolve. So these are issues that, according to his philosophy, go against reason. Now, Mullah Sadra claims to have resolved that problem through his philosophy, but we're not going to delve into that. But what we know is that religion says that when you die, your body is going to be resurrected, and your body is going to be asked about what you did in this world, in this form. So how can we reconcile that with certain philosophical theories that say it's impossible for something to go into non-existence and then come back into existence? So there might be truths that are beyond reason, truths that we are unaware of, that our mind cannot grasp and comprehend because of its own limitation. The mind cannot conceive of itself becoming non-existent and going back into existence. So these are limitations that the mind has. Space and time, for example. We cannot comprehend eternity. We cannot comprehend infinity. We can define it. We can make a concept about it. But we can never, ever grasp eternity with our minds. If you sit down here and try to think as hard as you can, try to imagine something infinite, you can't imagine it. You can't imagine something without a beginning and an end. Because the mind is limited and is finite in itself. So it cannot go beyond itself. The spirit, though, being metaphysical, is able to grasp eternity because it in itself is eternal, according to some theories. Well, let's assume it is. Because metaphysical things are not bound by space and time, not confined by space and time, they're able to grasp things that are beyond this world and understand them. That's why if you reach a certain level of spirituality, then you live, in reality, you're living eternally. Just like they say, you live in the now. The now is neither before nor after, it's eternal. And you experience eternity. You experience what it means, what it feels to not have a beginning and not have an end. But this is spiritual knowledge and not rational knowledge. Now, logic is concerned with the rational part and not with the intuitive, spiritual, nor the sensual. Now, when we come to knowledge itself, again, knowledge in the Aristotelian context, there are things that are known to us through a mediator and things that are known to us not through a mediator. So I'm going to divide things like this. Via a mediator and not. That's how the logical division happens. This is the binary division of things. And we're going to use this when we do the syllogisms. So I'm starting with it from here. So knowledge is either via a mediator or not. If it has a mediator or through a mediator, then it's knowledge by correspondence because it corresponds to the thing that the mediator is allowing us to know. If it doesn't have a mediator, there's nothing in between us and the thing known, then it's knowledge by presence because the thing itself is present inside of us. We're not knowing the knowledge itself, the thing known through something else. And I'll give an example. So if we define knowledge as the presence of the known and the knower, and this is a broad definition. If you want to talk about the knowledge by correspondence, you would confine that to the presence of the image of the known in the knower. But this is more broad because this is including the knowledge by presence as well. But anyways, that'll be clarified in a little bit. So again, the chart that we had. What is known is either present in the knower via a mediator or not. So we know things either through a mediator or not through a mediator. If it's present inside of us through a mediator, then it's called knowledge by correspondence. What are examples of these? Well, things that are known to us through their form. The trees, houses, animals, humans, even non-existent things. A unicorn. A unicorn doesn't exist, but it exists in my mind. And it exists in my mind through an image of that thing, not itself. So there's something between me and the thing known. The unicorn, its image, me. The unicorn itself is not inside of me. The cow himself, the cow itself is not inside of me. The house that I see is not inside of me. I know the house through the image of the house that's inside of me. So, definitions as well. If you define anything, that definition, I know the thing through this definition as well. So it's an image of the thing, form of the thing. Nouns, if I say house, whatever noun I say, it's through a mediator. I don't know the actual noun, I just know the word that tells me about that thing. But the actual object isn't present inside of me. If it's not present through a mediator, It's called knowledge by presence. This is a different type of knowledge that human beings have. Examples of that, our knowledge of ourself, your awareness of your own being. You knowing yourself, you don't know yourself through anything else. You just know yourself. It's always present inside of you. That awareness of the self is knowledge by presence. Another one are emotions. When you feel pain, you feel the actual pain. The pain is inside of you. The pain itself is in you. You experience pain itself. You don't experience pain through a mediator. It's not an image of pain that you have. You have the pain itself. Hunger, when you're hungry, you're actually hungry. You're experiencing the emotion of hunger, the feeling of hunger. So the knowledge of hunger is present in itself inside of you. And this is a different type of knowledge. Now, why do they differentiate? Well, because we can know things through or by presence, like our soul, our self, spiritual realities that we experience, not through forms, not through objects. We experience them and they become part of our reality. This is knowledge by presence. And this also helps us in understanding how God knows things. Does God know things through images and forms? Or is every truth present inside of God? So this is, there's a lot of implications following this division. There's different types of knowledge, and you could come up with a lot of different theories by dividing this. And it helps us understand the way we know things and the way God knows things and others know things as well. Now, logic only deals with knowledge by correspondence. And it doesn't deal with knowledge by presence. So that's why we're going to remove this. And again, I said that this is not part of logic. This is epistemology. But we have to understand it because we want to know what kind of knowledge are we dealing with when we study logic.
Knowledge by correspondence, you have immaterial and material, all knowledge by presence.
All knowledge by, yes. So you can divide knowledge in different ways, depending on how you're looking at it. So if you want to look at it from the material and material aspect, we'll have a different division. Here we're trying to understand how we know things. How things are known to us. They're known through the soul, so by being present. Logic doesn't deal with that.
By presence. What I would categorize.
Okay. So you're dividing knowledge into, what's the category that you're making?
I was just clarifying, in my head, knowledge in itself can be categorized, but how we presence can be categorized by correspondence or knowledge. How we perceive epistemology, how we perceive knowledge by correspondence to knowledge. I would just organize.
Okay. So that would be concerning knowledge, and I think it would be in a different sense. I mean, you're looking at it from a different point of view. Here they're looking at it in terms of being present in the knower. What is it divided into? So either it can be present itself, or the form of the thing can be present. The object known. That would be a different categorization. And you can do that. I mean, you can divide, and depending on what you're looking for, you make your own categorization. So if we know that logic doesn't deal with knowledge by presence, and it only deals with logic by correspondence, we'll continue dividing this into different categories because we want to understand specifically what logic does and how it functions. So if you go on to dividing, here I gave a few images over here. Knowledge through a mediator. The actual object is not present in the individual, only the form is. Here's the tree, the image is in the mind, not the tree itself. The unicorn, which doesn't exist outside, exists in the mind, but through the image of the unicorn and the form of the unicorn, and not through the animal itself. Without the mediator, a person cannot know the object. If there was no tree, I would never know about the tree. If there was no planet, I will never know about the planet. Yeah, our mind. Well, basically, it could use images from different animals, put them together, and form a. I mean, how did humans come up with a unicorn? They saw like four-legged animals. I mean, it looks like a horse, and the unicorn symbolic for something, and they give it a specific meaning, and then this is unicorn, and we talk about it. We have it in stories, we have it in movies, we have it in cartoons. Unicorns exist in our mind or in our own reality that we've created. But whatever we exist in our minds, again, is the form of that thing. So, and yeah, so this is an important point. That's what the mind does. It takes things together, creates its own turn type of thing. So without the mediator, you cannot know the object. So this means that there are things in this world that we need to see in order to know. If you have a person who's born and you keep him in a room all his life, and he doesn't see anything in his life, he'll never know that things outside of him exist, outside of that one room that he's in. And the more you go and you discover, the more knowledge you get about images and forms and stuff like that. And it helps you build bigger pictures and understand reality in a better way. So, and these objects either exist in the external world or not. Now, knowledge without a mediator, we have, our knowledge of ourselves, our emotions, etc. They exist inside of the human being. Now, since logic doesn't deal with knowledge by presence, only by correspondence. So we'll continue with the division over here. We eliminated the other ones. We have knowledge through a mediator, by correspondence, and if it's by correspondence, that knowledge could either have a judgment or no judgment. And if it has a judgment that comes with it, then it's called assent. And if it doesn't have a judgment that comes with it, then it's called conception. We only conceptualize the thing. And I don't think it's visible on the screen, but I think they can see the slide. So I'll explain it in a second. Knowledge by correspondence, corresponding to something, whether it's the image in our minds, the definitions, the images, whatever it is. If I make a judgment about those things in my mind, then it's called assent. If they're just there without any judgment about them, then it's called conception. I only conceptualize them. I have no judgment. Now, the difference between conception and assent. Assent, and this is not in the book that we have. This is from another book, and I thought it was necessary to put, just so we can understand the idea much better. Assent is only related to one thing. We can only make judgments about the things we know in one specific case. And that is the relationship existing in a predicative sentence and a judgment about whether or not the sentence is in accordance with reality or not. So if we say this sentence, God does exist, we have a subject and we have a description of that subject. So God and God exists. So God does exist. In itself, the sentence is conceptual. I can say bananas are yellow. Okay, they are yellow. Bananas are blue. I can say that sentence. But whether I make a judgment about it or not is what differentiates assent from conception. I'll conceive of bananas are blue. It's there in my mind. That's how I said it. If I say no, they are not, so I don't believe that they are blue. Bananas are blue. If I don't believe that and I make a judgment about it being false, I've reached assent. If I don't make a judgment, it remains conceptual. So you can only make judgments if you have this type of sentence. If I say, for example, house, can you make a judgment about that? You can't. It's a noun. You can't give your opinion, or you can't make a judgment about nouns. This snake is dangerous. If I believe and I say, yes, it is dangerous, I don't have to say it, I just have to believe it, then I've reached assent in that. If I haven't, or I believe it's false, I've reached assent in it. But if you just say, and I have no idea, I don't know. Is it dangerous? I have no idea. I've never studied snakes. I don't know what kind of snake you have. you've said it, I conceptualize it, but I don't make any judgment about it, then this is conceptualization. It's conception. Conception, on the other hand, may be related to one of the following. Number one, a singular conception, such as a noun, a verb, run, eat, banana, house, whatever it is. This is something I can only conceive of, but I can't make a judgment of. The second case is the predicative relationships, which is over here, but without the judgment. So if you have a doubt about something, you don't have assent in it, it remains a conception. It doesn't become an assent. It doesn't become. So our conception about life existing on other planets. Life exists on other planets. This is a big thing right now in the news, right? And humans are trying to discover that. But no one can make a complete assertion. Nobody can say, yes, they do. So but you can conceive of the idea that life does exist on other planets. But until you know for a fact that it does, whether you go and discover it, or you believe it through some scripture, or your grandfather's been telling you it since you were a little kid, and you just happen to believe everything your grandfather says, then you make a assent over there. You make a judgment, yes, life does exist on other planets. Non-predicative relationships, such as commands, run. Nothing to judge about that. You just conceive of it. Prohibitions, questions. Is the sky blue today? Is the weather nice today? The question. You just conceive of it, but the question itself is not something you can make a judgment about. So these are all things for which there is no external actuality beneath them, and so there is no possibility of them according to reality. Or I took this from Shaykh Muzaffar's translation by Shaykh Karni. I'll amend that before sending it out. As such, there is no assent or agreement in this either. Now, the fourth case is incomplete composition. So, for example, a possessive construct, genetic possessive construct, such as like Zahra's father, Ali's car, John's business. You can't make any judgment about that. You're ascribing one thing to a person, and you're giving him possession, but there's no judgment that you can make. Why is this important? Because we use language every day.
Those things, believing in that,
yeah.
Believing that is her father. That's
but here, it's not telling you. You're just saying Zahra's father. You're not saying this is Zahra's father.
Well, wouldn't you? I mean,
Zahra has a father. You can make a judgment.
Yeah. I think that's what you're getting at, right?
But I'm just saying my table. Okay, make a judgment.
I can make a judgment.
I'm not saying it's my table. Forget this. My boat.
But you are saying it's my table.
I'm not referring to any table. Forget the table. Let's say boat. I'm not saying this is my table. I'm saying my boat. I'm just possessing the boat, whatever it is. I'm not saying that this boat there is mine.
I see what you're saying. It's an issue of language.
Well, that would become here. It would be predicate.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's no is. It's like saying my boat. ...
Yeah,
I think I'm confusing. In my boat, I'm going to assume you're about yours. Well, in common colloquial.
You would, but it's incomplete.
It's an incomplete sentence.
Yeah.
So my boat has no meaning.
So I'm confusing how we.
Yeah, you might fill up the gaps in your own mind. You would assume a continuation. Like this is my boat.
My confusion is me filling in.
Yeah, so you put this is my boat, whereas it doesn't exist. Let's say like the bird's nest. What about it? What's wrong with it? I'll tell you the bird's nest. Okay, then what? So it doesn't have meaning in itself. Or its equivalent in a relative clause, or between an adjective and the noun the adjective describes. A large house. Okay, what about it? Well, just a large house. An empty swimming pool. Okay, then what? You can't make a judgment about this stuff. You're just saying something, describing something. And
Sorry, like I just thought of something. Like, so imagine if you said my boat, or if he said the bird's nest. What if the next part does not exist? You see, because it's like you hear the bird's nest and you think, okay, there's a bird with a nest or whatever. But then if the next part is negating it, then
it changes though.
you see.
Oh, but both of those, they're both conception until you believe it. Statement.
Well, the first half you can't believe in it, can you?
You can't, so it'll always be conception. No matter
Because
what.
it could be negated, right?
But the second part of it, when belief comes in,
So the sentence you made, the second one, bird's nest does not exist, that becomes a predicative sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then, because it says it does not exist, then you can say yes. This relationship between existence and the bird's nest is actually there. You believe in it, or does not there. You don't believe it. And
So
then
you phrase it and say the bird has a nest. It's been you can't negate that because it's going to be a contradiction, right? But if you can just say a bird's nest and then negate it, does that make sense?
so through you're using negation to show that the sentence is predicative or
The
not.
first part is like Zahra's father. But then what if the following does not exist because God, something like that, or whatever, or her father passed away, or whatever.
Abducted by an alien.
Does not exist, or we don't know.
He doesn't. He's never existed, or he doesn't exist now.
Either. I don't know. I'm just.
No, thank you. I didn't think of it that way. So now moving on to continuing the categorization. Now that we've categorized, we've had this chart over here, which was we've had knowledge, eliminated knowledge that doesn't have the mediator. We removed that from logic, and this divides into or branches out to knowledge by correspondence. Knowledge by correspondence either has a judgment or not. If I make a judgment, it's assent. If I don't make a judgment, it's conception. We saw where I can make assent and where I can't make assent. And now assent and conception can both be divided into two more categories each. Assent can be divided into axiomatic and cognitive. Similarly, conception could be divided into those two as well. Now, it is 7 o'clock, I believe, right? I think we're going to have to end it here. I wanted to finish this off today. That's how the syllabus is. But I think we'll leave it until next week. And then next week we'll finish this off. So we'll push everything a day forward in the syllabus. There's not much left of this, but this does require some time as well. So inshallah, next week we can continue off of this point, finish this, and move on to the lesson number 5. So I wanted to finish 2, 3, and 4 today, which we'll finish next week. The week after we'll start with number 5. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. If there are any questions before we end the meeting, please do mention them or go ahead and pose them. If not, we can discuss it on the chat, and then we can I can answer any questions on the chat if you feel more comfortable with that. That would fall. This would be here. In a sense, it would be axiomatic. There are things in like the law of non-contradiction. These are things that don't require thinking. Yes, these don't require thinking. Don't require reflection. You just know it, right? Now, how do you not know something like the law of non? There are people that actually oppose the law of non-contradiction. They don't believe in it. Does that mean that it's not necessary knowledge, not axiomatic? Or does it mean that the person has an issue? So God's existence, is it something that's that simple? Everybody should know it. Does it even require thinking? Or does it fall into the category where it's cognitive and it does require thinking and analysis? So these are the two divisions that we're going to go into next week. And this would answer that question specifically. There are things that you make a judgment about that require you to analyze before reaching that judgment. There are things that don't require analysis. You just know them. And you have to have things that you just know. Otherwise, we can never have any knowledge in our lives. There are things that we have to just know as human beings, like the law of non-contradiction. If we didn't know that, and we need to prove it, we weren't able to prove it. Because everything we prove in our lives, in our minds, uses the law of non-contradiction. If I accept that two contradictory things can exist at one time, I can't prove anything. Well, I can say that this house exists because I believe that it cannot exist and not exist at the same time. If I didn't believe that, then I can't believe this. I can't make that argument or that proposition. So there are things that exist in the human mind without thinking, and from those things, we figure out the other stuff that we don't know. Require more thinking. Now, can we figure out? Can we reach a level of intellectuality where many other things become axiomatic for us, like God's existence become so clear for you that you don't even have to think about it? Does that make it axiomatic, or is it cognitive? But it's just that you figured it out, and you don't need to think about it anymore because of how clear it's become to you through your argumentation or your thinking. Most likely it'll move into here. So everything you acquire and it becomes so clear to you and so obvious that you don't have to think about it anymore, it comes into here. And this list increases. But there are things that you have to start out with. Otherwise, you'll have no knowledge at all. But inshallah, next week we'll go into more detail. Okay, I guess I'll end the meeting right now, inshallah. And thank you for coming. And inshallah, next week we'll continue from here on. And please, on the group chat, do give me any feedback or any things I can improve upon or work with. And inshallah, we can have a very good experience. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Yes, I will send the slides over on the. Are you on the WhatsApp group? Okay, so I'll send the slides on that group tonight, inshallah. Thank you. You're welcome. Come on.